Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I did not expect to be making this video. I was under the assumption before I actually sat down and watched the linebackers this year that this class wasn't anything special. There's nothing to get excited over. So I was just going to skip over them, focus on some other positions. But I got to tell you, after sitting down, checking out some of these guys, watching the film, I fell in love. I absolutely adore this year's linebackers class. I think there's a lot of sleepers. I think there's a lot of guys that are going to be very solid contributors. Now, sure, I will say I don't think there's a Fred Warner this year. I don't think there's a true superstar, but I do think there are some very, very capable guys that are going to carve out some very nice careers and roles for themselves in the league. And we'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. But before we jump into this, please make sure to leave a like down below if you're excited for the draft like I am. It really helps out the channel a ton, shows your support, shows you care, and I really do appreciate it. And also make sure to subscribe for more draft content just like this. We're going to be pumping these out over the next couple weeks up until the draft, and then also after the draft, so we can talk about some of the scheme fits, some of where guys landed, hand out some grades, all that good stuff. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my top 10 linebackers in the 2024 NFL Draft. Starting off with my LB10, we have Michael Barrett out of Michigan. And Barrett's a pretty straightforward player. I like him a lot. I'm a big fan, and I think he's going to find himself in a role in the league for a decade plus. But basically what we're looking at here is a really good run defender that isn't super athletic and isn't going to be fantastic in coverage. But what sets him apart from other guys of that mold is the mental side of the game. I think he's a super smart player, and more importantly, I think he's a really good leader, and I think he is wise beyond his years as a linebacker, which is saying a lot because he's a sixth-year senior, so he's basically already in the grave. But in all seriousness, like, he really impressed me with a lot of, like, the down-to-down teammate stuff. I wasn't in Michigan's locker room, so I can't say this guy was 100% a fantastic leader. He gave rousing speeches at halftime that elevated the entire team and made Harbaugh cry. Like, I can't say that. But what I can say is watching him on the field, you can tell by the way he interacts with his teammates before and after the play and the way his teammates interact with him that he commanded a lot of respect. And I think that is a respect that he definitely earned. He came in, wasn't a highly recruited prospect, isn't somebody that a lot of people are looking at, but he definitely overachieved. He definitely, exceeded his expectations. And I think he deserves to be talked about a little bit more than he is. I think he brings a great energy to the field. I think he's somebody that is, like I said, commands respect. You can tell when he makes a play, his teammates go crazy. And then when his teammates make a big play, he's always the first guy there to celebrate with them. He's a great communicator, really good at helping guys get set before the play, really good at pointing things out before the play, that type of thing. He's a super technically sound linebacker. I was really impressed with his tackling in particular in that regard. Now, he's not the most athletic guy in the world, so there's going to be instances where he tries to, or not the most athletic and not the strongest, I should say. So there's going to be instances where he kind of overestimates himself in those regards, especially with his tackling, which is why it's not like an A+. And then the other place that really comes into play, the overestimating his athletic ability and his strength, is his run diagnostics, where you're going to see instances where he's going to take angles that, for a linebacker that's a little bit quicker, would be fantastic, and you'd blow up a play. For him, he's just simply not quick enough to get there. So he's reading it correctly, he's just physically not able to get there, that type of thing. But outside of that, he's a really instinctive player, really smart, good zone IQ. His zone coverage is only low, again, because of the athletic ability, and that's what really holds him back, is just being a mediocre athlete and not being super strong to boot. It would be one thing if Barrett was like the Hulk, but he ran a 4.7, right? I don't actually know what he ran, but he's not super strong. He's not great at shedding blocks. He's going to get blown out of gaps because, fullbacks or guards are going to be able to move him kind of easily. So you definitely have to worry about that. But he's a really good blitzer, really smart blitzer. I was really impressed with how he was able to kind of avoid contact and things like that. So I think Barrett definitely has a role in the league. He reminds me of Jack Sanborn, which, just for reference, if you don't know, I don't do one-to-one comps because I think you're never going to get a perfect one-to-one comp. You're always going to oversell or undersell some part of a player's ability. Shades of is just more, I'm watching this guy and I think, oh, he reminds me a little bit of this other guy. And that's kind of what we're getting here. Sanborn, someone I was super high on coming out of Wisconsin. I thought he was somebody that was being underrated. He ended up going undrafted, came into Chicago, played a really good special teams role, stepped up as the Sam linebackers, played a little bit of backup Mike when needed. I think Michael Barrett is fully capable of doing the same thing. And I think, if nothing else, he's somebody that teams are going to love to have on special teams for the locker room. And I think, you know, worst case scenario, I think he has a special teams captain patch in his future, which is a lot more than you can say for a lot of players in the league. Moving up to LB9, we have James Williams out of Miami, who's a bit unique in this group because he's the only one who didn't actually play linebacker in college. He is a converted safety who is declaring as a linebacker, and he's the total opposite of Michael Barrett. If Michael Barrett is this fantastic leader, you know, a high floor type of guy that, you know, maybe isn't going to be a superstar in the league, maybe isn't going to move mountains, but is going to have a solid role on a team no matter what, James Williams is more of your boom or bust, really banking on traits type of guy. But when you have a 6'4", 231-pound converted linebacker that hits like a truck, is more than capable athletically, and has all the upside in the world with a little bit of feel in man and zone coverage and some okay run diagnostics, you know, you're kind of willing to take that swing. Right, James Williams is one of the nastiest linebackers in this class, and considering he's coming out as a junior, that really excites me. You know, I would like to think that if he stayed for, and you know, you could knock him for this, if he would have stayed another year as a junior, probably be a lot better off, probably could use that extra year of development, but he was coming out as a senior next year, they probably would have kept him at safety, probably would have continued to develop him in a position he's just not equipped for. And that's why I'm okay with him coming out as a junior, because I think what's going to end up happening with him is he's going to get drafted somewhere as a bit of a project, probably not going to play outside of special teams his rookie year, and the hope is you can kind of reel him in, hone these skills, and take advantage of what you have in front of him. Now, Williams isn't some hyper athlete, but he's definitely above average. He's definitely capable of playing sideline to sideline, capable of shooting gaps, you know, that type of thing. And when you're 6'4", 231, that's kind of all you need. He has an absurd length, absurd wingspan. The dude is just a massive fucking human being. And when you have good play strength and you're a good tackler, he's a very sound tackler, he's got that physicality, he's got the energy you want, he borders more on being a little psychotic as a player. He's a good blitzer. He's somebody that's like a missile when you send him downhill. He's exciting. He's a very, very exciting player. He's also pretty okay at reading a quarterback's eyes in zone, and his angle awareness is pretty solid. His hips are inconsistently fluid, but there's times where you look at him and you're like, oh, okay. And then there's other times where you're like, that's why he wants to play linebacker. So it's kind of a 50-50 thing with him. I think he'll be a great special teamer again, if nothing else. But if you can get some of these things that are a work in process, like his run diagnostics, his gap discipline, his plan when he's trying to shed blocks, you know, the fact that he's a little bit handsy in man coverage, his ability to read play action. And it's not so much that he doesn't read it, I don't think. I just think in the back of his mind, he's like, you know what? Even if this is play action, even if they're going to throw the ball, I'm going to hit the quarterback anyways because I'm simply better. And I like that mentality from him. I like the way he plays because he's absolutely reckless. And that can be bad. I think it's a good thing for now until it becomes not a good thing. So I like Williams a lot as a projection. He reminds me a little bit of J-Ron Kearse, who's just another athletic box. He's more of a true safety, but just like this big athletic box guy that makes big plays. And I think James Williams at his peak can absolutely play that type of role. I think it would come more as a will linebacker, though, you know, a weak side backer. But Williams is exciting. I mean, if you just want to watch somebody play some of the more chaotic football you'll see in this draft cycle, kick back and throw in some James Williams film, because there is some crazy shit on his film, and it's really fun. It's really exciting. And I hope he works out in the league, because I think he's somebody that would be super fun to play with in like Madden, or just to watch a highlight compilation of, because I think the potential here is absolutely immense. So I like James Williams a good bit. Moving up to LB8, we have Jalen Ford out of Texas, who is, you know, more of the in line with Barrett type of guy. Super, super smart linebacker. And I think his intelligence, if nothing else, is going to keep him as a starter in the league for a while. I don't see him ever being a superstar, kind of in line with Barrett, where he's a super high floor, kind of low ceiling type of guy. But when you watch this guy's tape, I mean, you can just tell he's the smartest dude on the field. The diagnostics and the discipline and the lack of falling for play action is just so beautiful to watch. He's another guy that just plays like a 10-year vet out there. Now, you'll notice he's not a 10-year vet when he tries to tackle. And granted, he's getting better in that regard. He much improved as a tackler last year. But there's going to be some misses. There's going to be some weird attempts, things like that. So just keep that in mind. He's very smart in zone coverage, very good at reading a quarterback's eyes, very good at just playing his area, not getting too greedy, not trying to, step on other people's turf, so to speak. Like, he's very good at just playing his role in zone coverage. Man coverage, he's also pretty capable in. I like the way he guards tight ends. He's not fantastic at it, but he's definitely capable of doing it within like 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, he gets real physical at the line of scrimmage too in coverage, which I like. Let's see here. He's really good at running downhill. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but when it comes to like shooting gaps and just getting to the ball carrier, he's a little quicker than he is in terms of, in open space or sideline to sideline. He's pretty solid at stacking and shedding. There are going to be times where he's going to get swallowed up. It happens. Mainly it's just because he's not coming in with, when it comes to shedding blocks, you do want to have a certain sense of, force behind you, right? You want to generate enough force by running quick, and Jaylan Ford just doesn't necessarily have that. And he's not like a nose tackle, so you can't expect him to just outright shed somebody right off the snap. So there's going to be times where he gets stuck, but it's not a strength thing. I was really impressed with his play strength. It was more of just that he's not quick enough to generate the force necessary to, be able to shed blocks against some of these bigger guys. Really good instincts, especially his spatial instincts, really stood out to me. He's good at passing off routes and zone coverage. That's something I forgot to mention there. His eye discipline's great. Doesn't fall for a lot of the eye candy. Really good on like option defense, for example. He absorbs blocks a little bit better than he sheds them, which can be good. That helps with the gap discipline, right? Just kind of stepping in, standing up, and taking away a lane from a running back. He's got pretty okay pad level as well. And I think he's going to be a very solid Sam linebacker in the NFL. In terms of weaknesses, like I said, he's not super great athletically. As a pass rusher, he lacks a plan. He's not, a very savvy pass rusher. If he can slip through a gap, he'll get to the quarterback, though. That's definitely something he's capable of doing. He's not great at covering running backs because of his hips being a little bit more stiff. So there's going to be issues there. Don't expect him to cover a guy out of the backfield. But again, with tight ends, he's definitely capable of handling that. And then when it comes to tackling, like I said, there's going to be instances where he's going to take bad angles. There's going to be instances where he leaves his feet a little too early, things like that. It's not the end of the world, and it's improving, so I expect that to continue to improve, but definitely something worth noting. And his physicality is good. It's not elite. He's not some unhinged maniac, but you can definitely tell he takes pride in hitting people. He's got enough energy to him. He's a solid enough communicator, and I think he can be an okay enough special teamer. Reminds me a little bit of Alec Ogletree, who was just another very solid linebacker. Bounced around in the league for a little while, but I think Jaylan Ford is definitely capable of being a starter somewhere. Again, I think he fits best as a Sam. Maybe there's a world where he's a Mike because of his coverage ability. Maybe you want to have him, playing further back. Don't expect him to be a Mike in like a Tampa 2 or anything like that. That's super reliant on athleticism, obviously. But I like what I saw out of him. I think he can be a solid starter in the league. And I think this is a really underrated linebacker class, and he's one of the guys that's a part of that for sure. Moving up to my LB7, we have Cedric Gray out of North Carolina. And it has recently come to my attention because when I do my rankings, when I'm scouting, I try to avoid looking at consensus rankings. I try to avoid looking at people I like's rankings because I don't want that to sway my opinion at all, right? I have fallen victim in the past to changing my board around in favor of consensus rankings, and it's gotten me in trouble. Like, and you can call this revisionist history if you want. I don't care. I loved the guy. I was so high on Puka Nacua last year, and when I saw people kind of start to put him at like, 4th, 5th round, late or like day 3 pick, I didn't agree with it, but I fell victim to being a little afraid that, it would tarnish my reputation or people would start to question my reputation if I was that far away from the consensus with this guy, especially a wide receiver out of BYU of all places. And that made me learn pretty quickly. Fuck the consensus. It's not going to hurt your reputation if you miss a couple here and there, or if you're a little bit higher on somebody than other people are. It's a live and you learn situation, right? I'm still new to this. I've only been making content a couple years. I've really only been doing serious draft coverage. This is my 3rd year. So I'm still learning in that regard. And with Cedric Gray, it's come to my attention, like I said, that I'm a little bit lower on him than the consensus. And that's not for lack of liking Cedric Gray. I think there's a lot to really like about him. He's a very rangy linebacker. His sideline to sideline ability is fantastic. He's a great gap shooter, a great just downhill player in general. He's got good angle awareness, good angle discipline, like I said earlier. I'm going to start using that now. We're going to use that for the rest of the video. He's capable of holding his own in man coverage thanks to his athleticism. He's able to hold his own in zone coverage thanks to really disciplined eyes and being able to read the quarterback. He packs a punch at the point of attack. You can see a play strength. I really like his ability to just fire downfield and hit dudes. Or downhill, rather, not downfield. Fire downhill and hit dudes. And, he's somebody that from time to time will stand guys up in the hole to kind of clog those lanes and force guys to bounce outside. And we'll talk about linebackers that are a little bit better at that here later on. His gap discipline's good. He's good at reading the field. His diagnostics are good. He's a really capable blitzer. He's not great at shedding blocks, but he is, kind of like we said with Barrett, very good at kind of avoiding contact and getting into the backfield. He's got great energy to him. He's a real physical player. So I'm saying all these great things about him. You're probably wondering, why isn't he a top 5 linebacker for you? Why isn't he your LB2 if you like him so much? Well, call me old fashioned, but I like a linebacker that can tackle. That's something that I don't think that's too much of an ask, right? To have a guy that can consistently wrap up ball carriers and bring them down and not get into too much trouble with that. And with Cedric Gray, there has been improvement, which is why this isn't like an F, but there's a lot of concerns. His missed tackle rate is way too high for my liking. I'll pop that up on the screen. I forgot to bring it with me here. He leaves his feet when he's tackling. He'll, go at ball carriers with his head down. There's a lot to work with there. Now, I will say, tackling is a very teachable thing, but I'm not going to just assume that he'll learn. Because at the end of the day, he made it to his senior year of college and didn't learn how to do it. Who's to say that 1 year with an NFL coaching staff will change it? And I'm not saying it definitely won't, but it's not a guarantee, which is why he's not higher. So I'd like to see him learn how to tackle a little bit better. His footwork isn't fantastic. His ability to shed blocks isn't great, like I said. There's going to be issues where he's going to struggle recognizing route concepts from time to time. So he's not a perfect linebacker by any means. He reminds me a little bit of Jordan Hicks, where I think at his peak, he will be one of those guys that is a good athlete and, kind of jack of all trades, master of none type, where, Jordan Hicks is going into year 10, is a very capable linebacker, has been on some good defenses, has been able to carve a legitimate role for himself in the league. And I think Cedric Gray can do the same thing. I think he's more of a Will than a Mike. I think he's somebody that you'd want, a little further away from the line of scrimmage, especially in coverage and things like that. I think he's a little bit better in coverage than Jordan Hicks was, but I like Gray. I think he's definitely a capable linebacker. And I'm telling you, if you can clean up that tackling, this dude is a freak coming downhill. He comes with just, crazy energy, crazy physicality. And I think he can be a super, super fun linebacker. And I'll tell you right now, I am rooting like hell for him to get that tackling figured out, because he will quickly become one of my favorite players in the league. As somebody who's a North Carolina fan and has watched guys like Jeremiah Gemmel and Chaz Surratt catch on in the NFL, I want Cedric Gray to be the change. I want him to be what CJ Stroud was for Ohio State quarterbacks, for modern North Carolina linebackers. Next up at LB6, we have Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky, who is a super fun player to watch, man. Kind of like James Williams. If you want to watch a just juiced up linebacker that likes to hit people, go watch some Trevin Wallace film. Wallace is a little more disciplined than Williams, so I think his film is more fun. But I love this guy, dude. I think he's going to be so fun in the NFL. Just an immense motor, always running hot, always running around like the Energizer Bunny. He wants to take your head off every time he hits you. He's quick to trigger downhill, which will get him in some trouble with play action. But again, I think he's one of those guys that in the back of his mind is thinking, you know what? If this is play action, screw it. I'm going to hit the quarterback or do something, get a little bit of pressure. He's a pretty solid blitzer. So I think him biting on play action is something you can live with, even if you want to clean that up a little bit. He's super explosive. He had like Roquan Smith level testing. I think he ran a 4.51. Just a super, super athletic linebacker. He's got that good burst. He's got good lateral agility. He's a very sure tackler, very mechanically sound in that regard, which is refreshing to see, because usually when you see these hyper athletic linebackers, they're kind of all over the place when it comes to tackling. But I think Trevin Wallace is definitely a very capable tackler. He's very capable of covering tight ends and man, thanks to that athletic ability, his ability to change directions, his hip fluidity, and his hand usage. He's very physical at the line of scrimmage and coverage, which is something I really like. He's got good length. He's a decently instinctive run defender. I wouldn't say his instincts stand out, but he's definitely aware of what's going on. And, I have his diagnostics as a C+. I think he's one of those guys that will overrun gaps and will overrun plays quite often just because of how quick he is. And that's not a super hard thing to fix when you have a guy like this. I think it's just a matter of reminding him, like, hey, you're fast and that's great. You're probably a little bit faster than the play developing. So let's dial it back just a second. Maybe give yourself like a quarter-second delay or whatever, just to figure out a way to kind of cancel that out. He takes really good angles in open spaces. Gap discipline's awesome. He's really good at holding his position, around the line of scrimmage. He's got really good special teams upside because of that athletic ability and that kind of tenacity. And I think he's got a really solid, feel in coverage, really instinctive in coverage. He's a linebacker that I think at his peak can be one of the rare breeds of guy that is really special in both run defense and coverage. I have his little comp here, shades of as Danny Trevathan. And I know that's weird because Danny Trevathan wasn't the most athletic guy, and the big selling point with Trevin Wallace is his athleticism. But I think if Danny Trevathan was more athletic coming out of Kentucky, you would have Trevin Wallace. You have a guy that's a very sound tackler and is super smart, but is having some issues in terms of catching on. Wallace is coming out as a junior. Trevathan was a day 3 pick because he wasn't exactly super perfectly refined, and also his athleticism did hold him back a little bit. But I think Wallace can absolutely be like a Danny Trevathan level linebacker, just with more juice, which if you imagine Danny Trevathan with juice, holy shit. Trevathan was somebody that had some issues getting off of blocks coming out. Wallace, that's one of his bigger issues. They both bit on play action pretty often from what I can remember. Granted, I was a little bit younger when Trevathan was coming out, so maybe excuse me if I'm not 100% there. But looking at some of the weaknesses with Wallace, I already mentioned the diagnostics need some work. Play action ability needs some work. The block shedding needs some work. He'll get stuck on blocks. He can be a little over aggressive downhill, which, like I said, he gets in position quicker than he should, and will put himself in a weird spot. He's not a super patient linebacker, which is, I think, something he could really benefit from. And his zone awareness needs a little bit of work, although he's very capable in zone when he realizes what's going on. And I think in zone coverage, especially with this type of linebacker, if you can just teach him to react to what he's seeing, you don't need to necessarily... And that's kind of what he's missing. Like, he's got the instincts. It's just he has a late trigger sometimes in zone coverage, so I'd like to see that improved. But out of all the linebackers in this class, I don't think it would be a stretch to say Wallace has the highest upside. I don't know if I'd necessarily give him that myself, but I think there's definitely an argument to be made, and I think Trevin Wallace can be a super fun player at the next level if things start to click. All right, now's where we start to get into the linebackers that I think are almost surefire good starters in the NFL. Maybe you're not going to have any top tier guys here. You're not going to find a Fred Warner this year, but I do think you're going to find some very solid, very, very solid starting linebackers in this class. The first of which is Tommy Eichenberg, who I've got as my 4B, so we've got a little bit of tie here at 4. And I'll tell you right now, 4B all the way up through 1 are very, very close for me in terms of their grade. You know, it's almost kind of a pick your poison type thing. And Eichenberg, he is probably my favorite linebacker in this class, just because he is a true throwback player. You know, you see right away shades of Bart Scott, who was just the epitome of a thumper, right? Just the epitome of a strong side thumper, really good, you know, downhill player. And Eichenberg's like the modern version of that. He's actually got some pretty solid coverage feel. He's an okay athlete. You know, he's not a fantastic athlete. You're not going to confuse him for Roquan Smith or anything, but he's definitely a little more fluid and definitely a little quicker than you'd expect. Now his hips are a little tight. You can see with the change of direction that becomes an issue. But what really stands out about his physicals is his play strength. This dude is loaded. One of my favorite aspects of his game is the way he will stand up lead blockers in the hole, whether it's a fullback, a tight end. I've seen him stand up a guard once or twice. He is awesome at that. Just getting up underneath of a guy, standing them up, taking up space, and then once he's got them stood up, tossed them to the side like they're a sack of potatoes. He's awesome at shedding blocks. So I adore his run defense. On top of just being super physical in the run game, you see that A+ physicality. He's a super sound tackler, not somebody that's going to leave his feet early, not somebody that's going to dive or take bad angles. He's really, really smart in that regard. His run diagnostics are awesome. His overall instincts in the run game are really good. His gap discipline's great. His eye discipline's great. You can just tell he reads the offensive line, the blockers, the running back, the quarterback. You can just tell he's reading all of them in an instant and triggering downhill super, super quickly. I mean, it's like at the drop of a hat, he's from his stance all the way back, he's from his stance all the way into the backfield, blowing up a run play. It's absolutely incredible. He's probably the best communicator in this class as well, which is really, really cool. There were a lot of instances last year of him seeing something pre-play, you know, whether it's a motion or a lineman giving a tell and kind of lurking up to the line of scrimmage, tapping a lineman on the butt, telling him what's going on, taking a step back, getting guys in position, switching stuff around. Like, he was awesome in that regard. He brings the boom, great energy, great physicality. If everything goes awry for him, I think he'll just be one of the most fun special teams players in the league, hence the A+ special teams projection. But I don't foresee that being his future. I think he's going to be an awesome Sam linebacker, you know, super high motor type of guy. You look at the coverage stuff, zone coverage, he's a little bit limited just because of his sideline to sideline ability isn't exactly there, you know, due to that lack of speed. He also doesn't have great coverage instincts. You can tell he's just itching to hit somebody at all times, so he's not going to concern himself with coverage every now and then. But he is capable in man coverage because he's one of those guys that can kind of manipulate you at the line of scrimmage with his hands, you know, send you off course, things like that. Play action, he will bite on from time to time, but again, he's one of those guys that I think really just wants to hit somebody, and he doesn't care if that's the center, the quarterback, the running back, the fullback, the tight end, the coach, whoever it is, he just wants to hit him. And he's definitely a capable blitzer as well. Now, there are concerns about his durability. He's had some injury issues. He's a little stiff. His arms aren't super long. But I think you're looking at a guy who is going to be a stud run defender at the next level. Like I said, I've got the shades of Bart Scott, who was that OG thumper, awesome run defender. I think Eichenberg can be that with a little bit of coverage flexibility. I'm so excited to see him in the NFL. And honestly, watching Eichenberg made me really sad that the Bears don't need a linebacker because, oh my God, given the Bears' history at linebacker, this is the type of guy that I'd buy his jersey day one. I'd be a super fan of. He's just that kind of dude. He is a dude. That is the best way to explain Tommy Eichenberg. He is that fucking guy, and I absolutely love it. Moving over to my LB4A, we have Peyton Wilson out of NC State. And listen, man, if you liked Tommy Eichenberg, you're going to hate Peyton Wilson. They are polar opposites. They're kind of like the yin and yang of this year's draft class, where you have Eichenberg, whose play style is a little more throwback. Not to say that he's like a relic of the past that won't make it in the current NFL. He definitely just has a more early 2000s play style, whereas Wilson is the epitome of the now. Just an awesome coverage linebacker. But that being said, I don't think I was more disappointed by a single player in this year's class than Peyton Wilson. And not because I think he's bad. I think he's very good. I think his skills are going to translate to the NFL, and I think he's going to be a very solid starter. That being said, when I heard there was a 6'4", 233-pound linebacker that ran a 4.43, my mind was racing with the possibilities. I was like, yes, we have a hyper athlete that's going to kill dudes. He's got the size to be this awesome run defender that's just going to bounce off blocks and kill running backs. And I got a big nickel. That's what I got when I turned on the tape. Because realistically, at NC State, Peyton Wilson's role was almost more of like a big nickel player. And that's okay. You know, I think he'll be able to translate to linebacker, which is why I have him more as a will, because I think he's going to be a very solid weak side linebacker, not somebody you want to see engaging with the line of scrimmage a whole lot. But just kind of looking at him as a player, you've got a hyper athletic dude. Like I said, a 4.43 40 time, great acceleration, great change of direction, super explosive, just awesome sideline to sideline and coverage. When he's out there moving, it's like he's gliding around. He makes it look effortless. It's truly a thing of beauty. I know I was just talking about how much I hate him. That he makes moving in the NFL, or makes moving at the college level look effortless, and I'm sure that'll translate to the NFL. He reads quarterbacks' eyes really well in zone coverage. He's a very nasty blitzer. And when I say nasty, I don't mean in the sense that he's got a lot of intensity behind his blitzing. It's just he's got like a legit pass rush arsenal for a linebacker and was very capable of coming off the edge, had a little bit of bend, a little bit of quickness. He was just fun to watch rush the passer as a linebacker. He's becoming more consistent as a tackler, still not great. He's improving, and I'm going to assume he's going to continue to improve for the sake of my mental health. He has a really good understanding of spacing. He has a high motor. He has a nose for the ball. He's very versatile. Like I said, he was playing like a big nickel in college. You could definitely play him off the edge a little bit. There's a little Drew Sanders to him in that way. You could probably play him at Mike if you're running like a Tampa 2, or, you know, you just want somebody that's a little more coverage based. Like if you're running a 3-4, I think he would be a great coverage backer if you have a really good run stopping downhill guy opposite him. He's got fluid hips, and then obviously he's got this big frame that, you know, hypothetically he could put a little bit of weight on and probably get better as a run defender. I don't know if you'd necessarily want him to do that because of how fast he is. We'll kind of have to see how coaches handle that. It'll probably vary by team to team. But where he really struggles is just in that run defense. He's not a strong dude. He's not an overly physical guy. He's not great at shedding blocks. He's going to, you know, kind of get pulled into blocks and fall off of them more than actually shed them. He's going to over pursue it from time to time, which, you know, is another one of those instances where he's just faster than his mental processing. So when he thinks he's in position, he's actually 2 yards ahead of where he needs to be. He's got a little bit of an injury history, something to take into consideration for sure. He plays upright against the run. His length isn't fantastic, so it's hard for him to stack and shed. And the thing that pissed me off the most about Peyton Wilson, the thing that really got me, is this dude has a tendency to get ran through. And when I say that, I mean if he gets in front of a running back, they are almost always going to gain an extra 2 yards. And I'm not saying he's going to get run over and, you know, completely screw up the play and give up an extra 20 yards, but he's going to wrap them up and they are going to fall forward for an extra 2 yards. He's not stopping anybody in their tracks. And it is so frustrating to watch a dude that's this big get ran through, man. You know, he reminds me a little bit of Devin Lloyd. I didn't love Devin Lloyd coming out for a lot of the same reasons. He was a really athletic, really good coverage linebacker that wasn't great against the run, didn't have that mean streak to him. He's starting to carve a solid career for himself in the NFL. I think Peyton Wilson can do the same, but I would be lying if I said I was a big Peyton Wilson fan, just because he's not technically what I'm looking for in a linebacker, but I think he'll definitely be good. You can't deny the athletic traits, and you definitely can't deny that coverage ability. Moving up to LB3, getting us into the top 3 here, we've got Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, and he's kind of like the middle ground between our last 2 running backs. He's not a superb run defender. He's not superb in coverage, but he's capable in both, and he's still super freaking athletic. I I mean, I love what Edgerrin Cooper brings to the table in terms of his athleticism. He has great speed, great acceleration, great hip movement, great ability to change directions, and he's got really good play strength. He doesn't sacrifice that strength in favor of being a little bit quicker, which shows in his ability to shed blocks and his ability to blitz. He's a very, very capable blitzer, not quite as good as Peyton Wilson because he doesn't have that like pass rush arsenal that Wilson does, but he's definitely going to take on blockers, shed them, and get to the quarterback at a pretty decent level. He's got really good footwork. His feet are really quick. He's capable in terms of bend. He's got this wicked length that really allows him to separate himself from offensive linemen that helps him rush the passer and helps him get off of blocks pretty solidly. He's got a high motor, high energy dude, just a fun guy to watch in that regard. He's a hard hitter, loves hitting dudes. You can tell he's not a great like wrap up tackler, but when he lays somebody out, you can tell there was a little bit of hate behind that hit. And, you'd love to see that with a linebacker. The linebackers these days aren't built like that anymore. So it's good to see a guy like that here. He is really good in terms of his short area twitch. He's very good at kind of shifting his motion in that short area, which is really nice to have as a linebacker, up at the line of scrimmage. His processing and play recognition in coverage is really good. He has very fluid hips, like I said, which make him more than capable in man coverage. His eye and gap discipline are pretty good for the most part. He's really rangy. And I think my favorite aspect of his game is just how good he is at sniffing out screens. If you're going to run a screen against this guy, you better think twice, think a third time, and then maybe even think a fourth time, because he just has this uncanny ability to find his way into the backfield against screens and make plays before the ball even gets to the running back, or, as soon as the ball gets to the running back, right? Now, his run diagnostics as a whole, I mentioned that he's, got some pretty solid processing and things like that, but his run diagnostics in particular are definitely a work in progress. There's been a lot of improvement, which makes me very, very hopeful, but you need a little bit of work there. Same thing with his tackling, the form and the technical aspect of it is, again, improving, but needs some more work for sure. His zone IQ is a little bit of a work in progress, kind of triggering to the ball and things like that. Although you see flashes of excellence there, which is why that's a little bit higher than his tackling and run diagnostics. He's a little bit lighter in terms of his actual build. You can tell by the picture alone, he's got a little bit of a skinnier build. He will over pursue angles from time to time, and he plays a little tall, but I like edge a lot. It reminds me a little bit of Ernest Jones, who was a pretty big contributor with the Rams Super Bowl team running that 5-1, needing a savvy sideline to sideline linebacker that could really shoulder a load, being the only linebacker on the field the way they were running that defense. And I think Cooper could do something similar. I don't think there's any teams running much of a 5-1 anymore. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if I am. But I think Coop can definitely come out and really be a very solid linebacker. Again, I think if you can figure out the tackling and the run diagnostics, which are making some great progress, he's going to be another guy that can be a very solid jack of all trades, master of none type of guy. And I mean, worst case, he can be a solid special teamer, but I think he can be a really capable will backer in this league. Maybe you can try him at Mike if you can get those run diagnostics and tackling a little bit better. I think he could definitely fit that role, but as of right now, I think he's going to be a very, very good weak side backer. And he's another guy I'm really excited about. I know a lot of people aren't talking about this linebacker class. Every single guy, the more I talk about him, the more I'm like, man, these are the guys I'm excited to track next year. Next up at LB2, we've got the Nepo baby of the group with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson. And I'm not old enough to remember Jeremiah Trotter Sr. all that well. I think he was starting to phase out of the league when I was starting to get into football, and even then I was only watching the Bears at the time, so not a lot of overlap there, but I did watch some of his old man's highlights after I watched his film, and there's definitely some similarities there. If you're an older viewer, you remember Jeremiah Trotter Sr. This is kind of like a smaller, I think smaller. He seems smaller. Maybe he's not as small. Maybe it was just those big 2000s Pats. But a modernized version of Senior in some ways. Not close enough for me to give him a comp again, because I don't remember Senior's game well enough, or couldn't tell you Senior's game well enough to really make that comparison. But focusing on Junior, we've talked for almost a minute about his dad. We're here to talk about Junior. We're here to talk about the prodigal son. I really like the guy. I think he's another high IQ linebacker. Obviously, some of that coming from those football bloodlines. I'm sure he's been studying playbooks and film and just the sport in general from a very, very young age. He's a great sideline to sideline mover. He's not this hyper athlete like Wilson or Cooper, but he's more than capable of getting where he needs to be. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Really good gap discipline, really good at, much like Eichenberg, standing guys up in the hole. Not quite as good as Eichenberg, but certainly not far off. He's great at doing that. He's great at setting up for his teammates, is something I really liked about him. He's a very selfless player. He's great at setting the edge and things of that nature to be able to have his teammates come back behind him and clean up. So he knows his role, he knows what he's doing, and that's always a great thing to see. He's great at kind of stringing together and setting up blockers in advantageous situations for himself to close up lanes, put himself in a better position to get to the ball carrier. He's very smart in that way. He's a strong tackler. There will be some misses from time to time, primarily because he's a little bit of a lunger, but for the most part, very sound tackler. His instincts in coverage are damn good, especially in zone. His reactionary quickness is really nice. I know he's not a super athlete, like I said, but his quickness in that regard is awesome. His body control is really good, which definitely stood out as the best of the group in that regard. He's a hard hitter downhill, definitely comes with that 2000 swagger where he wants to punch you in the mouth, lay you the fuck out, and he's not afraid to let you know about it, right? He's got the physicality and the tackling ability to do it. Like I said, he's got good zone instincts, and he's really good at reading the quarterback's eyes in zone coverage. He's good at slipping blocks as well, which helps him a lot as a blitzer. Now, he's more than capable of, setting up and straight up shedding a block as a blitzer as well, but he's really good at kind of slipping those blocks, slipping by guys, getting into the backfield quickly, almost untouched, which is really good. In terms of the downsides, he's a little stiff, not super stiff, but there's definitely moments where you'd like to see him have a little more wiggle room. He doesn't have a lot of length. He's not the longest guy in terms of arms. He's also not the biggest dude in the world. That 6 foot 228 build might be a little bit of a build from the past, which is why I think more of a Sam role might be better for him. But that's okay, because he plays bigger than he is. He will be fooled by play action, but again, he's another one of these guys where I think that's less him getting tricked and him thinking, that it's actually going to be a run, and more just him saying, fuck it, I'm going downhill and I'm going to hit somebody, which I definitely can't complain about. And there is one downside to his intelligence in the run game, and that is option defense. He will be a little bit aggressive in that regard, so you might have to teach him to hesitate a little bit there, but again, that's just him having that quick trigger wanting to hit somebody downhill. Reminds me a little bit of Malcolm Rodriguez, kind of a scrappy guy. Like I said, a little bit undersized, but he's muscly, he's tough, and I like Trotter a lot. I think he can be a damn fine linebacker in this league. I'd love to see him paired up with more of a straight up coverage guy in a 3-4, kind of be that second linebacker where he can just play downhill, because he's good in coverage, but he wants to play downhill. He wants to hit somebody. That's what he wants to do. So I love Trotter. I can't wait to see him in the league. And, here's to hoping he's better than his old man. And finally, my LB1. We started with a Wolverine. We're closing out with a Wolverine. We've got Junior Colson out of Michigan, who is just your prototypical off-ball Mike linebacker. I love this dude. I'm such a huge fan of Junior Colson. I want to make a designated video about him here probably after the draft. Once we know what team he's going to, I'll be able to talk about what role he's going into and all that, because I kind of fumbled the bag in terms of being able to make film breakdowns before the draft. Now it's about getting these rankings out. But looking at Colson as a player, ideal frame, 6'2", 238, good length, good wingspan. Just the ideal build for a Mike. He's got the physicality and the energy you want. He's a really good communicator as well. He's a super secure tackler, probably the best all-around tackler in this class. There's not a lot of instances of him missing tackles. There's not a lot of instances of him getting tackles broken off of him. He is awesome in that regard, and you gotta love a short tackler. He's got fantastic eye discipline, but what worries me a little bit in run defense is his gap discipline, just because it's a little inconsistent. Now, there are flashes of him doing absolutely incredible things in terms of his gap discipline, but you want to see it be more consistent. So because he's so great at everything else in run defense, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume he's probably going to be able to work that out too, because his gap discipline right now isn't even bad. It's just subpar. So you want to see that improve for sure. I definitely think he's capable of improving that. In man coverage, he's more than capable of hanging with tight ends because of his physicality. Again, he's another guy that really likes to get scrappy at the line of scrimmage and coverage. He's able to stand up lead blockers in the hole. He's probably the second strongest linebacker in this class behind Eichenberg. Obviously, I don't have anything to back that up, but just like from watching him, from what I was getting, I think his strength is incredible. I think he's able to stand up those fullbacks and tight ends, and every now and then maybe a guard. I think Eichenberg's a little bit better in that regard. He's a hard hitter, like I said, super physical. Just when he's coming downhill, much like a lot of the linebackers I like in this class, he wants to take your head off, and he's not afraid to show it. Really good reactionary quickness and overall awareness and zone coverage. Just a really good zone defender. Grade would be a little bit higher if he was just a tick more athletic. He's a capable athlete for sure. His athleticism isn't going to hold him back by any means. It's just a matter of, him not being an elite athlete like Peyton Wilson, for example, right? He's very instinctive in run defense and in coverage for the most part. He's got a high motor. He's very, very quick to read play action. He's one of these guys that likes to trigger downhill just like some of the other guys we've talked about that struggle with play action, but he's not going to fall for it. He'll trigger quickly downfield, but if that play action's there, he's quick and backpedaling, getting himself back in position. You rarely find him out of position. He reads a quarterback's eyes very well in coverage. He's just an awesome all-around linebacker. It's hard these days to find these all-around linebackers. Granted, Colson does lean a little bit more into the run defender territory, but he's more than capable in coverage as well, and I can imagine that will transfer to the next level. Like I said, though, the gap discipline needs a little bit of work just in terms of making that a little more consistent. He has a bit of a high center of gravity, which will cause issues from time to time. And then also there have been some injury concerns in the past. He played, I think it was the national championship game with a broken hand, which, personally with a linebacker, I think that just shows he's a tough motherfucker more than anything else. But, it is what it is. You definitely have to bring that up. You definitely have to acknowledge it. He reminds me a lot of Nick Bolton, who is one of the more underrated linebackers in the league. Fully capable guy, good all around. Not elite in any one trait, but definitely a great all-around linebacker. And I think Junior Colson can absolutely be that for somebody else. I know I've said this for a lot of these linebackers, but I'm really, really excited to see how he's going to transfer to the next level and what he's going to do in the NFL. I know my linebacker one last year, if you watched my draft coverage last year, was a little disappointing in Jack Campbell, but I like Colson more than I liked Campbell. I had a higher grade on Campbell because he was a little more athletic, but I like Colson almost everywhere else more than I liked Campbell. Colson is one of my favorite linebackers I've scouted, period. I am super, super excited to see what he's going to do. And again, this is another one of those linebackers where part of me is a little sad that the Bears are set at linebacker because we don't need him, a little suffering from success, if you will. I'll take Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards and Jack Sanborn, of course. I'm not complaining. It's just there's that little part of me that's like, but what if, dude, But either way, somebody's going to get Junior Colson. They're going to be a lucky son of a gun when he's in the middle of their defense, commanding the respect of the offense. And honestly, I can't wait to see it happen every single Sunday. But anyways, folks, that is going to do it for my top 10 linebackers in the 2024 NFL Draft. I hope you all enjoyed. And if you did, please make sure to leave a like down below, as it does help out the channel a ton. Shows your support, shows you care, all that good stuff, and I really appreciate it. And also make sure to subscribe, because you'll get more draft content like this. And who doesn't love more draft content? We're going to be talking about the draft all the way up until the draft. We're going to be live streaming during the draft over on Run the North, which is my podcast channel. There's also a link down in the description to that. If you haven't checked that out yet, you definitely should. And, we're going to be talking about the draft after the draft, because there's always that sweet, sweet post-draft content, film breakdowns, talking about how different guys fit into different schemes, talking a little bit about draft grades, things like that. It'll be a ton of fun. I know you won't want to miss it. If you like this video, you'll definitely like those. And if you like this video, let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts were. Do you agree with my takes on these linebackers? Do you think this is an underrated class? Do you think I'm gassing it up a little bit too much? Is there someone I'm overrating, someone I'm underrating, someone I didn't mention at all that you think deserves mentioning? Maybe I haven't watched them yet. Let me know down in the comments below, and I can definitely go out and check them out, add them to my rotation, see if I like them. We can have a conversation, all that good stuff. But thank you all for watching. And to everyone out there, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you truly do deserve it.
Met a chance on the throwback.
This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that